legacies are often spoken as if they stand still, but time has its own way of testing memory, right? So, what endures, what fades, what quietly transforms, that's where reflection begins, in a sense. And somewhere in the passage of that, reflection finds its own tempo. 1 year after Ratan Tata's passing, I'm gathered here with two eminent personalities. Ajay Kumar, a journalist at heart, a journalist in performance, who shaped the narrative for Ratan Tata's office. Ajay is here with us on this podcast, and we have another distinguished personality, Dr. Mathew Thomas. Dr. Mathew Thomas is a retired IAS officer, author, corporate strategist, defense analyst, and a photographer. Wildlife photography is his passion, and I've seen some of the glimpses. It's really heartwarming. He's a doctorate in international relations. Dr. Mathew is an independent voice outside the Tata Group who has long contributed to the shaping national conversations, including with the President of India and several personalities within and outside India. And what I'm fascinated is his biography of Ratan Tata, published last year. I think is a bestseller, capturing both the spirit and the stillness of remarkable life of Ratan Tata. Over to you for your reflections and your thoughts.
Raghu, thank you for having me on your show. I'm really happy to be amongst the veterans of Ratan Tata's office. Now, my association with Mr. Ratan Tata dates back to 1994 when he had come to meet the then industry minister whose private secretary I was. Since then, we have been friends, meeting occasionally, discussing a whole, array of subjects, including defense. That was one of his most favorite subjects, talking about finance, international politics, wide spectrum. And and as you know, he has a weakness for cars. I can't say that I'm knowledgeable as he was, but I was quite knowledgeable. So we used to discuss about cars, the big American muscle cars which he loved, like the Plymouth, the Firebird, the Thunderbird, the Lincoln Continental, which he promised that he'd allow me to drive and take him to Taj, but that didn't happen. Okay. Now, what are your recollections of the man? Raghu, it will take probably 20 hours even to get to the, the first layer of this personality. Now, all I can tell you is that this man was unique in many ways. I knew him both as a friend and as an admirer of mine. Now, one of the most important things that struck me about him was his scientific mind, his scientific temper, his vision, and his passion for honesty and integrity. We used to talk about it many times, why and how he stood steadfast in adhering to his values, although he knew that it would cause his conglomerate pain in many ways. And from 1991, he had a trying time, but he stood steadfast and he overcame all of it. Now, a man's determination is something that had to be admired. And most important thing, what struck me, then Ajay, I didn't met Ajay, as you said, to speak. What struck me is the enormity of his achievements and his grand expression of what he has done. In other words, he underplayed what he had done, unlike many of us who would speak more than what we have done. That is this man's personality.
Very grounded sometimes, I would. Ajay, your reflections, I think you have a close proximity, 15 years working in his office, in a sense. You've seen him in different modes, so to speak,
Okay. Yes, I did spend 14 years in his office. And actually, I can recall that the first time that, in a sense, Mr. Tata impeded on my consciousness was when I was executive editor of the Economic Times in the early 90s. And I remember hearing fairly authoritatively that when the reforms were introduced in 1991, and the Indian industry as a body was raged against the reforms because it suited them to have a closed economy where they could make abnormal profits and not have to face up to competition. And in this milieu, here was this man who was, I believe, quite openly for opening up of the economy and for inviting competition and for, in a sense, arm twisting Indian industry into becoming globally competitive. And that was so refreshing, so different at that time when, and people forget it now, though we see these tendencies even now. But then in the early 90s, these were very, very strong. And the Indian industry, by and large, was very inward looking. So that was one thing that made an impression on me. And as you know, Raghu, I was born and brought up in Jamshedpur. So in a sense, Tata-ness is in my genes, in my veins and blood. And that was always a reason why then I sought out the Tatas to change from journalism to non-journalism. And I was assured of one thing, that I will confident about one thing, having known the Tata Group, having seen the Tata Group's existence on the ground, that in the Tata Group I would not be ever asked to do anything that would go contrary to my conscience. This I was confident about from what I knew of the house, what I knew of the group, what I knew of Mr. Tata, that I would, and at that time journalism was going through a phase when it was going to be very difficult to stick to the narrow and straight and still continue to sort of be at peace with yourself. So it was a bit of a refuge for me to go into the Tata Group, away from journalism, and all that was, I mean, every bit of confidence that was there was placed in the character and personality of Mr. Ratan Tata. Had he not been at the helm, these sentiments would not have been there at all at that time. So that's how it began. And through the 14 years, I've had no reason to regret my initial assumption and presumption. It indeed has been a great journey. It was a great journey. And to have had the privilege of watching Mr. Tata from very, very kind of almost like the front seat of a slugfest, because he was constantly out there battling this or battling that. And
Any anecdotes you remember?
what I do remember is that when I joined, he took the time out to, in a sense, make me feel at home. He took me out in one of his many vintage cars and gave me a spin down Marine Drive with the hood open. So, you were kind of the envy of everybody. And he used to have a very kind of a kooky sense of humor. I remember at one time that he was telling me about the time that he was in Los Angeles on the back of a 6-door limousine. Sitting with him at the back was a somewhat controversial character out of Indian Telecom called Siva. And so there is Mr. Tata and Siva lounging at the back. And who's driving the car? Siva's wife. So, and it was the simple pleasure. It was the simple pleasure in you can envision the scene. Here they are going through the traffic of LA, and they're at the back of a six-door car. I don't know whether the hood was open or not, but they are lounging with perhaps a bar there or something, and being driven around perhaps in a chauffeur's uniform by Shiva's wife. So it was just that Mr. Tata thing was with him was that I think the most dominant impression I have of him is his groundedness. Ever grounded in the reality of the moment, of the time, the situation that he is in. So fully aware of all the challenges and all the complexities that his own situation, his own ambition, his own vision would come up against. But not one to be at all deterred by that, and yet at the same time, not one to take a fanciful approach and think that whatever he wishes were to happen would happen automatically without there being an intense struggle about it. I think this is, for me, this is the strongest takeaway from the association that I had with him. He was utterly rooted. But Dr. Mathew, would you care to comment on that?
Yeah, Ajay, I completely agree with you. R&T has been a unique personality. And my favorite theme is this. R&T combined in his persona characteristics that are of opposite polarities and melding seamlessly. Now, let me explain myself. Normally, an aggressive businessman has no empathy.
Sorry?
That is, an aggressive businessman does not have empathy.
Empathy, yes.
And sympathy and consideration for the employees.
Exactly, yes.
At one side, you had a sharp businessman, an aggressive businessman.
Right.
And on the other side, you have a man who would cry with you when you are in pain. These two characters of opposite polarities don't house in the same persona with such confluencing force. And that made him unique. And there's been time when I used to discuss with R&T. He's a man, very reticent, would not speak. So one day I told him, sir, I've read so much about you. I don't think you're a creation of history. So he said, what does that mean? I said, sir, let me put it differently and you'll understand. I said, you are an accident of history. So he said, that is deeper. I said, sir, the reason is very simple. When you're an accident of history, it takes some force, unknown force, to create a personality like you. Because you have compassion, you have empathy, you have aggressiveness, you want to win in business deals, you want to keep the priority, the importance of nation foremost in your thoughts. You want to ensure that what you do is good for the country, good for the society, and then for the Tatas. And he used to always tell me, Thomas, what is good for the country is good for the Tatas, and it cannot be vice versa. And therefore, Ajay, if you look at most of his decision, whether to add iodine to salt, he said, in fact, he told Menon, he said, who was the MD of Tata Chemicals, he said, you need to add iodine because it fortifies, it is important for pregnant mothers, he said. It doesn't matter, it costs more. He said, you have a duty to do this. Okay. Second, the nano car itself, he knew it was a risky move, but he said there has to be a move in order to fill the requirements or fulfill a need of a class that is the middle class. In fact, all his decisions, in fact, the Mudra project, he told me that, in many of our conversations with him, he told me, he said, Thomas, the Mudra project was tricky, but we did not do it in order to make profit. I knew that I will come in for criticism. I did it because there had to be a huge corporation which has the capability to take the risk, but be a technology demonstrator so that others can follow, because that is the only way we can fulfill our energy needs. And this is exactly what Henry Kissinger told me about him. He said, Thomas, he's probably amongst the 2% of the world's businessmen I admire most. And that is because for Ratan, he said, it is not about making money. It is not about business to create wealth. It is business to fulfill a social need through the vehicle of business and create wealth, because Tatas represent the repository of the trusteeship concept. Wealth being held on behalf of society and give it back to society through the philanthropic organization that Tata Trust actually represents. It's a unique set of combination of personalities in here.
You're right. You're right.
And it's unique. Every day used to be a discovery for me. And you tease him, he will not tell you what he did. Then I said, so why didn't you tell me before that these were the difficulties? He said, Thomas, I'm not going to tell you anything. You go research and find out. And therefore, it is like saying, that's why many people, I don't know if you remember what Winston Churchill talked about Russia before, that is the Soviet Union before the Second World War. He said it is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. If there is one person who would suit this definition, it's RMP. Not because of any negative connotation, because the more you unravel, the more unraveling you have to do. And every time you unravel, it is a pleasant discovery. It is not like a sting in the tail. That's different. Here, it's always a pleasant discovery. And look at the things he has done. Ajay, let me tell you. You are talking about, this point we had discussed maybe over about 8 to 10 hours, how the Indian industry wanted to have the license Raj. Because they sell what they produce in a captive market without the customers having the right to decide what they want or the quality they want. And let me take you back to 1983 strategic plan of R&D. In fact, the roots of his 2-decade planning for Tata Sons and the policies he adopted had its roots in 1983 strategic plan and the strategic plan 2.0, which was started in 1989 and then which he completed just before he took over as chairman of Tata Sons in 1991. So through a combination of the 1983 strategic plan, which underwent revision in 1989, 90 and 91, he crafted perhaps the largest reformation in Indian industrial regimes. And that Tata to the forefront. And please, Ajay, you know better than me. He achieved all this by discarding and opposing crony capitalism, which was an easy way of increasing your revenue, making new projects, establishing new industries, and making greater profits. That's why I call him the lodestar for the nation and an icon of the world.
Yeah, and the thing is that in doing all this, he was merely being himself, and he wanted the Tata Group to embody excellence, because excellence is the one thing that can guarantee you at least a chance in a competitive world. He absolutely wants India to become a modern economy, an economy in which there is choice, an economy in which there is fair competition, in which there is genuine competition, because that's how the world should be. So, in one sense, he was also an idealist who wanted things to be the way they should be because that's the way they should be. I think also essentially, Mr. Tata was an entrepreneur to his fingernails. You hinted at that, said that he wanted to solve society's problems. That exactly, and he wanted to solve society's problems. He's a problem solver, and a problem solver and a risk taker who would employ business to solve the problems of humanity, of Indian society, of the Indian state, of the Indian polity. And he believed in the goodness of business to do this, but do it in the right way, do it in the fair way, do it in a competitive way, not do it by sort of hiding behind any kind of barriers, any kind of artificial crony capitalism, as you say. It was something that, in a sense, just went against his grain, and he couldn't help that.
Grounded in reality, grounded in demeanor, and with all this, still his lighter side of being a prankster. I've I've I have a share of a few pranks that he played, one on me, on twice or thrice on me, but a fun kind of a. I mean, I could relate to him because as a person, I could joke with him and say that after a long, arduous, week of travel and all that, we're walking down. I just want to drop him off, and I walk with him. No, no, you go. No, I'll walk with you. And then I joke and say that I'm going to take time off tomorrow. I'm not going to work. I'm going to just take time off. I'm going to take it easy. But then I poke fun at him and say, "But you can't do that, and you can't do that." because he was having crocin because he was running whatever. Despite that, I joked with him and I said, "You can't do that. I'm not going to." Look at his reaction. He just laughed and he said, "Raghu, I could do that many years ago. Now I can't do it." Still in that banter, in that poking fun at him, he had that way of reacting with such a humble, and I had to just laugh. I said, "Yes, you can do that."
That's what I said. He was always grounded.
And a prankster too. Once there was some other occasion, I walked with him, and then he says, "Do you have a ride home?" By the time I sent my driver, so I didn't have a ride home, and this was at 9 o'clock in the night, 8:39, I think almost. So I said, "No, I because at the time you'll get someone or some other driver will drop you." But he said, "No, I can drop you. You're on the way." And I froze. I said, "No, no, no, I can't. Come on." He said, "No, no." But and then he jokes and he laughs at me and says, "But even I don't have a ride. Krishna is dropping me." He says. I said, "What?" The Krishna Kumar was right there, and I said, "Uh, Krishna, we can drop him." And I look at him and I said, "No, no, no, you." He said, "Now KK is my boss. I work with him, and he's there." And yeah, yeah, of course, let's go. And he knew I'll be very uneasy. That is another prankster. He said, "No, no, come sit with us." I'm sitting in the back. They are sitting in the front. Chairman, vice chairman, and the people, the valets and others, the
Did you
guy with the
almost stop
turban and all
breathing?
this, they're all smiling
Raghu,
and
did you
they're
stop
laughing at me,
breathing?
and
Raghu, did you stop breathing?
I was I was I was in my own spin. I said, "What is this going on?" He said, "Sit down." I sat down and I was laughing. I said, "What is going on?" And I said, "Listen," I said, "Please drop him first. Don't drop me first because my home comes first." Then KK said, "Yeah, yeah, of course, of course." And then I sat quietly, and then Bhaktawar came in. I got out of the car, opened the door for him, and shook hands. He patted me. He looked at my face. Just ourselves, prankster in a way.
I have to tell you about the first time that I went to Bhaktawar. This is before I joined. I called on him at his house, and the shock of that house has not yet left me, because it was, I mean, nothing that befitted a person like Mr. Tata. This is 1998, by when he is already chairman of Tata Sons for 7 years. He's living in a 3 bedroom house in Bhaktawar. His 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 living his living room does not have a carpet. His living room and his dining room are not air conditioned. There is one old, I think, a piano or something lying on in one corner. Uh, there was only one chap at home who would open the door, and there is Mr. Tata. That is it.
Here's
He
simplicity. Do you remember? Do you
that
remember?
was that was I think, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, what would you expect?
So human, so simple and so human. Do you remember, Ajay? Once we were at his home, we had gone for some work, and you and I had a work session with him, and his dog was not keeping okay. I think he was getting a little, and the way he held him and he was talking to him and telling him what is wrong with you. I will guess stay, whatever. You and I were looking at each other and saying that this precious moments we'll never see ever again because we don't see that. He's standing there and talking to him and say, "What are you doing?"
I'll tell you, Raghu, I'll tell you a very amusing incident, okay? I don't know if you've been to Halakai, right?
Yeah. No, for a year, Dr. Mathew, I was also in the same premises as his house. There are some Tata accommodation there also, and I was in one of those. I was in one of those houses there. So one would see Mr. Tata come out and play with the dogs, and what I really remember is that the dogs would know before Mr. Tata was coming out that he was coming out. And they would get all excited and they would be barking. And then Mr. Tata would emerge. So even before there was a small, if you remember, there was a small garden in front of his house in that little compound. Yeah, and he would throw the ball and have the dogs get some exercise there. and the dogs would be so sensitive to him coming out that even before he came out of the house, they would be they would sense it. They would sense it. Yeah.
They could sense his arrival. Yeah. Ajay, I need to tell you something very interesting with RNT, okay?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Now, if you have been to Halakai, you must have been to Halakai, Raghu?
Right.
Okay. Now, you have a drawing room, and on the right, you have his dining room. He has a round marble top dining table and plastic chairs, okay? And I am quite heavy. I weigh about 94, 95 kilos. So when I sit on the chair, it shakes a little bit. I said, sir, can you imagine? I said, can you imagine? What will I go tell my friends that you have plastic dining chairs and that makes us uncomfortable to sit and eat? So I told him, sir, nobody will believe me. So he says, what do you expect me to have as dining chair? I said, sir, you won't imagine. People will be thinking that you have chairs with diamonds and rubies studded on it. And then you know what Tata told me? He said, Thomas, imagine how uncomfortable it would be to sit on diamonds and rubies. That is deep. No, that is deep. Deep in the sense,
That's true. That's
wealth
true.
to that extent is harmful to you, is what he
That's-
meant. And that's
That's
R&D,
his kind of.
okay?
I
That is
want,
deep. No, that is deep.
yes,
Deep in the
yes.
sense, wealth to that extent is harmful to you, is what he meant.
That's true. That's true.
And that's
That's-
R&D, okay?
What struck me
Yes.
is after he went on to that Hornet F-16 or Hornet. I mean, he flew that and came back and all of that. After that episode, when I was speaking to him, I said, "How did it feel? How was it? Going through?" He said it was. He explained whatever, but one thing he said, "Huh?
He said, G, he's in the pull of the
Pull of the G." So he said all of that. But he says we were flying so low, and I was in his mind. He was saying that we are going through villages, temples, mosques. We are disturbing so many people for our joy. That was what his reflection. That was in his bothering him in his mind when he is flying, and he's telling me that. I said, "Oh my God!" On one side, he's saying exhilarating, doing that, G forces, all that. How what a wonderful experience that is. But at the same time, he says, I was conscious of the fact we are disturbing all of these people. So grounded in reality, even in that moment, he's expressing that. I said, my God, yes, so that's that. I would have not thought about that. I mean, you're all about the machine and
That's what I
the
said.
expression. But in that moment, he was also saying that I'm so conscious that we must be creating so much disturbance for others. Oh my God! So
So that's what I meant when I said that he was always grounded in the 360-degree of whatever was happening. So while he is enjoying himself, the G4 and all that, but at the same time he's aware that he's disturbing a lot of people. So that under what Dr. Mathew said, that what is this, somebody is a mystery wrapped in an enigma, or
Yeah. Is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. This is said by Winston Churchill of the Soviet Union before the Second World War.
exactly a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. That is so that leaves you to wonder whether any of us, Raghu, you knew him for many years, Dr. Mathew, you knew him for, as you now say, you knew him for close to 30 years, and I knew him for perhaps the least amount of time. Did any of us really know him?
I don't think I would say so. I know him because he's always a surprise, always something new.
What we used to say, in his office was that you would, if you were to try and second guess what Mr. Tata will say about something, you do it at your own peril, because he would surprise you. He would inevitably surprise you with perhaps an observation, with perhaps a question, with perhaps rebutting what you have assumed would be his response. So oftentimes I have wondered, did anybody really know him, know the absolute core of Mr. Tata and all that was there? And I really, I mean, I'm with you, Dr. Mathew, when you talk about how many contradictory impulses and sentiments and characteristics he embodied in his own self. I mean, just look at the uniqueness of his. One of the country's leading industrialist businessmen dies, and millions turn up to see him. Millions turn up to pay respect to his body. You know, where is that? Where is that coming out of? It it's not an honor that would be afforded to any other industrialist. In some way, Mr. Tata touched the hearts of millions of people. In some way, they felt that they knew him. In some way, they felt that he was good for them, that he thought about them, he thought for them, and he in some senses was almost a member of their family. That was the sense that, I mean, that's what I make out of the fact that so many tens of thousands of people filed past his body in Bombay the day after he died. And yet, did anybody know him?
The enigma. On that note, let me take a pause and play a short film that I made on his birth anniversary last year. Not many have probably seen it, or some may have seen it. So if you don't mind, may I?
Please.
Please.
He never sought the spotlight, and yet it always found him. Quietly, steadily, and with a heart full of resolve, he fiercely nurtured the Tata spirit. His leadership was of action. Courage was his strength. Humility was his compass. Integrity, his unshakable foundation. His life was a story of incredible promise, delivered with strength and conviction.
और एक प्रॉमिस किया तो मैंने मिस रखा कि 20 साल वंडरफुल 20 साल मैं सब टाइम आपका पार्टनर रहेगा आपका भलाई के लिए मेरा डील है मैं कहाँ भी होगा मैं आपका कुछ तकलीफ होगा मैं कुछ मदद कर सकता है मैं वो करना चाहिए आपको आप लोग मेरा फैमिली हो गया मैं आएगा नहीं आएगा मगर मैं कहाँ है आपको पता होगा और कुछ भी होगा तो मैं आपके साथ आपका सुनना मदद करना कोशिश करना वो मेरा दिल में है
A story of unwavering purpose and passion, of what he left behind, of what he inspired others to carry forward. At the threshold of a new era, in a rapidly evolving world, he dared to dream beyond convention, captivating generations to come. Ratan Tata transformed everything he touched and inspired everyone around him. Created a culture of excellence and made his nation proud. He taught us that the most powerful force in the universe will always be the human heart.
Hardly ever saw him speak in Hindi, you know. This is where I captured the essence, very rare footage which I found while making this film. There was only one other time I remember someone had told me that he spoke in somewhere in UP or one of those kind of somewhere in the north he had spoken, and he spoke in Hindi long ago. And he mispronounced the name, instead of saying Atiti, he said something else. It was very funny. So I asked him that you made a blunder. Did you? He says, yeah, I know. It was very difficult. But he said, do you have the recording? I said, I don't know. I'm looking for one. If you have spoken, then he said, if you find it, I want to hear it. I said, I don't know. I only heard that you made a blunder in speaking. He said, yes, I made something. So there is no recording of that one. But later I found this is much recent, of course.
You're talking about blunders in Hindi, and Dr. Mathew has been close to many people in power. I remember as a journalist covering Rajiv Gandhi's electioneering in 1991, and there was this speech that he gave in UP where he says, "Agar hum jeetenge ya hum losenge."
I think he said Adivasi instead of Atiti or something like that. So it was a big blunder.
Ratan Tata is allowed to mispronounce Atithi. It's a very difficult word anyway, Atithi.
That's okay. But it really made everybody laugh. And I only heard the echoes. I asked him, did you? He said, some blunder. Do you have the recording? I said, I don't know. We'll try to. If you find it, I want to see it. So, but what a personality. Yeah.
So, Dr. Mathew, you had perhaps more time with him in the years that you wrote the book than perhaps next to members of his family. I would dare say, because the number of hours that you would have spent with him on a one-on-one and or at least in very close proximity would be fairly unique and fairly rare. And also because he was a fairly private person, and yet he opened up to you, and he so how fond were you of him?
Oh. I could die for him. I could take the last bullet for him. That's what I told him one day. And in fact, he was also, Ajay, let me put it like this to you. When he was all there, okay, when we used to sit down and talk, nobody used to be allowed to come in to disturb. I'm not taking names, whoever it may be. Whatever position that person had. I used to say, okay, you come for a meeting at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning, and the meeting will be slotted by Dilnas or Deepthi for 1 hour. There were days when the meeting has gone till 7 p.m. in the evening, okay? All day. And somebody came and told me, came there, I'm not going to tell you his name, probably if I have an occasion to write. He said, did I surprise you? He told Mr. Tata. He said, no, you have not surprised you. I have surprised you because I have somebody else here sitting with me who I'm not going to let go for the next 3 hours. So that's how close we were. There are many things which can be said. There are many things which cannot be said. When I say I could take the last bullet for him, I could literally take the last bullet for him. During his most despondent days, I'm choosing the word very deliberately. I still remember, I beg your pardon. I said despondent days. That is when he was really down and under. I still remember it was December 18, 2019 when the NCLAT judgment came against him. Okay. It was a Wednesday. And he called me and said, I want you here. Come to Mumbai, Thomas, fast. So I went and met him on the Sunday. Sunday doesn't allow normally. It's his private time. It was the morning when I went and met him. So I said, sir, unburden it. Let me put it on my shoulder. And I will help you with this case since I've done so much research about you and the group. And there were copious notes which I exchanged with him. And Ajay, believe me one thing, as far as I understand, there is no secret is kept away from me. No secret whatsoever. Whether it is his family, whether it was his trepidations, whether it was his fear, his apprehension, what he thought would be the way history would judge him. And he was almost overcome by grief after this judgment. And he used to ask me, he said, Thomas, I have been given the fiduciary charge of the wealth of my ancestors, okay, so that I can leave it for the next generation and for generations to come. What will happen if the case goes against us? I will not only be able to die peacefully, I will have to grieve every moment that I live, because I would have breached inadvertently the trust which would have been reposed by my ancestors. This is what he used to tell me. And whether it came to Cyrus Mystery, whether it came to his parents, whether it came to his mother, whether it came to his father, his business relationship with everybody, there is nothing he kept away from me. Okay. And I told Raghu, the book contains only, let's say, 10 or 15% of what he has told me, because I need to ensure that it gets interred with me, because there are many things he told me in confidence, his apprehensions, his fears, everything. And believe me, he's a very adorable human being. His level of empathy is incredulous. Ajay, when you've been, there are many times when I walked into his house unannounced. Okay, I used to walk into his house unannounced. I used to know every guard. Okay, so they never used to stop me. And I knew Subhaya well, I knew Rajan well. And when I used to go, I used to surprise him when he was having dinner. And Rajan used to serve him with Rajan's daughter sitting with him and having dinner together. Now tell me, Ajay, which industrialist, you forget industrialists, which common man or which family would allow their quote-unquote servants or cooks, daughter or son, to sit with the master of the house having lunch or dinner? It is unheard of. So, it's unheard. I couldn't believe it. And that is the kind of man he was. He was, what do you say? But I'll tell you something. Arendti used to always tell me, he said, Thomas, I am the creation of my grandmother. When Arendti was about 6 or 7, his mother left the family, okay? And it left the father very distraught. Kept him very aloof. You're talking about the 1940s, when you can imagine psychology of a man whose wife has left him. You can imagine. Very traumatic. So he lost his mother and lost his father, in the sense he became aloof and he became a kind of sad person. And what happened? He went through a lot of complications in school, in society, and wherever he went. And therefore, his grandmother took him under her wings and talked to him about stories in London. They used to live in what is called the York House in Twickenham. Okay, that is a place where Sir Ratan Tata and Lady Tata lived from 1906 to 1911-12. Okay, and there Mahatma Gandhi used to go live there. Indian freedom fighters used to go live, and he used to talk about the values of his grandmother. And his grandmother used to tell him that if you have made a mistake, it doesn't matter, even if it's your servant or if it's your driver, you need to go and say sorry to that person. And as I've written in my book, Arendti used to say, when my grandmother got upset with me for things I had not done, in the evening she used to write a small note and slip it under my door and said, I am sorry. I made a mistake. It was not your fault. It was my fault. Number one. Number two, Arendti was a very meticulous man. And he learned it from his grandmother, who used to send notes to her chef, send notes to a hairdresser, send notes to chauffeur, saying that at 4 p.m. I will leave for house X at Malabar Hill. I will use my Cadillac today. So that's how, and Arendti also was so meticulous. And empathy. He learned it from his grandmother. And his grandmother, he says, was his guiding light. So, as a matter of fact, what Arendti was for us was a creation of his grandmother, Lady Tata, whom he calls a lady who was ramrod straight, and words of morality, integrity, and honesty rang through all the corners of the house in which they lived.
That the one thing that his grandmother instilled in him was the need always to preserve your dignity. Never to do anything that would, in a sense, demean yourself in your own eyes. And to retain that dignity, the sort of the sense of, I mean, even if you find yourself in an uncomfortable position, don't lose your dignity. Well, I mean, she backed him. She backed him to go to the US, right?
She insisted that he should go to pursue his studies because he wants to go. And his father wanted him to go to UK and be a chartered accountant. And he said, no, I want to be an architect. And he says, I want to go to the US, because he had been to the US before, and he calls US his second home. And there is something which he told me, which I've also said in that. He says, Thomas, I mean, I've not written in exactly the same terms. He says, if it were not for my grandmother, who used to tell me that you have a solemn duty to come back to India, serve the Tatas in whatever capacity you can, to preserve and uphold the tenets which envelop the Tata philosophy. And he says, I had shown to my grandmother that I would come back to India and fulfill her wishes. Otherwise, he said, I would have loved to stay back in Los Angeles with his girlfriend, Carolyn Jones. Yes. That's right. Oh, absolute principles. It can be said, he may hurt himself to uphold the principles. I'll give you another instance which I've written in the book. His mother had gone to Sloan Kettering for a treatment, that. I'm not taking the director's name, okay? R&T felt that if the director was there during his mother's critical treatment time, that she would have survived. And he was distraught when his mother died. He came back and wrote a letter to my dear so-and-so. I believe that your presence would have perhaps saved her. But we will have to live with that pain. And the next para, he says, you're always welcome to India. And if ever you plan, I would like you to invite you to my home and be my personal guest. A normal man would have said, yeah, marunga, pakad ke, ye karega, khayega, all kinds of things, right? That was not R&T. R&T was a gentleman given during the most testing times. We couldn't do it. I would not have been. I would have gone, cut the doctor by his collar and probably hit him and gone to jail. But R&T was completely different. No, that's all right. But here in this case, it is the frustrations of an ordinary man that will come to the fore. But in R&T's case, there was humility, there was dignity, there was self-respect, there was understanding in everything what he did. It's so difficult to be R&T, let me put it like this. It's very difficult. You can't be R&T. Nobody in the world could be R&T. Therefore, I called him an accident of history.
I love that expression, accident of history.
Unimaginable. Raghu, this will go on endlessly, okay? Raghu, this will go on endlessly, okay?
I know it will go endlessly. And on that note, let me say thank you for taking the time to reflect on this personality we have been so fortunate to have met and spent time and worked with and for him.